Hello and welcome to the show that debates on the hottest issues of the day. You're watching The Big Picture. The feud between striking pilots of the erstwhile Air India and Indian Airlines has resulted in the partial paralysis of the state-owned carrier. The strike by Air India pilots entered the 7th day today, forcing the national carrier to cancel as many as 14 of its international flights that cause inconvenience to hundreds of passengers around the country. The crisis worsened yesterday with the airline's executive pilots coming out in support of striking pilots, asking the management to revoke the sack orders and hold immediate negotiations to end the impasse. The striking pilots have made it clear that they do not intend to return to work, leaving passengers stranded all over the country. The government is now looking at shutting down the airline's international operations. The Aviation Ministry, which so far had said that pilots must first resume work and then only talks would be held with them, has hardened its stance over the weekend. The Directorate General of Civil Aviation on Saturday served show-cause notices to 11 pilots whose licenses have been moved for cancellation and asked them to reply within a week. The Aviation Ministry is bracing for more such agitations in the coming days as the Dharmadhikari Committee report on bringing parity between the erstwhile Air India and Indian Airlines employees begins to get implemented in the coming weeks. Tonight on The Big Picture, we discuss the current mess that the state-owned carrier finds itself in. We'll also discuss the Aviation Minister's remark about the merger between the two entities not really working out as was hoped, and the future of Air India as well. We put the question to our panelists tonight: can India sustain a state-owned public carrier in the face of appalling mismanagement of the same? And to discuss this important issue, joining me in the studio today is R.Krishnan, consulting editor, Cruising Heights magazine, as well as Dipankar Mukherjee, former chairman, Parliamentary Standing Committee on Civil Aviation. Also joining us on the show is Sanat Kaul, chairman, International Foundation for Aviation and Development, India chapter. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Let me start the show with R.Krishnan, if I could. Sir, the Aviation Minister recently remarked that Air India is sick and he hopes it doesn't really go to the ICU. Does that remark sufficiently sum up the kind of state that Air India finds itself in? It's a telling remark, isn't it?
It's not that Air India is in ICU for the first time. It has been off and on in ICU. 10 years ago, then came out, then again went in, then it came out. But this time it's something looks like a terminal or permanently placed in ICU. Now, who is responsible for it? Yes, certain sections of Air India themselves are responsible. And I think there are certain sections of the government who failed to take any decision at the right time. Because, it gives you a feeling now that if the government cannot manage Air India, can it manage India? That's the kind of situation you've got into. Now, they have to take a decision, and they have to take a very strict decision, and they need political will to do it. If the government has political will in terms of taxation, like a retrospective effect on taxation, why can't they take a decision on this? That doesn't require any legislative change. They just have to deal with 200 or 300 pilots. If they can't deal with it, I think there's no other solution but to close it down.
Do you agree, Mr. Mukherjee, with what R.Krishnan seems to be suggesting? That
obviously not.
Your views on the subject?
Obviously not. As far as the responsibility for this mess, this merger issue just cannot sidetrack. And the Parliament, because as ex-parliamentary, you referred to me as a former chairman of the Standing Committee, not only that, as a parliamentarian. And the Parliament is celebrating 60 years. I have only two queries. Parliament is celebrating 60 years. What does it mean? Accountability of the executive to the Parliament and accountability of the Parliament to the people of this country. Now, it is not the question of what Mr. Ajit Singh says or Mr. Krishnan says, what I say. Why no one is referring, including the media, especially the business media, the two reports of the Parliamentary Committee, consensus, what do you call, all the parties. One is the report of Committee of Public Undertaking, one of the oldest institutions. And that is, I think, 12th March 2010. So that is a telling report. Someone should see this before they talk about whether it should be an Indian Airlines, whether India want or not. And the next is the CAG report, which has also been tabled in Parliament on 8/9/2011. Can there be any doubt who is responsible for this mess?
Why don't you come out and say it? Who is responsible?
Why should I say? This is what the report says. This is what the Parliament says. Should I read it out, what they had said?
Briefly, if you could, sir. Very
briefly, I'll just quote. And who was the chairman of the committee? I was not the chairman. No, not a CPM, nor CPIM. Kishore Singh Dev, one of the most respected parliamentarians. I'll just...
Very briefly, if you could, sir.
I will just... This is very brief. As a matter of fact, on the issue of merger, Kopu is more emphatic when he says in recommendation number 3, the committee also recommends that all the loss attributable to merger of IA and AI should be recouped by the government, as the decision of merger was a policy decision spearheaded by the minister in charge.
Right, right.
And this was an abrupt policy decision.
Right.
In such a haste. There is very telling remarks.
Right.
Now, is that, please.
Right,
now,
right.
the question doesn't arise at the way this is being told, as the government is being a big benefit this thing by giving such a package. Now, they are the fellows who are responsible, the then Minister of Civil Aviation.
Fair point. So let me go across very quickly to Sanat Kaul. Welcome to the show. First of all, sir, let me ask you this. Not only is the Air India pilot strike entering its second week today, but it's also already financially ailing state carrier about 96 crore rupees till date. What's your stand on the pilot striking right now? How do you see this in the current scenario where Air India already is in doldrums?
Well, to begin with, Air India pilots have always been extremely irresponsible, and they've always been going on flash strikes, and the government has always had a soft approach towards them. It's time now to take a hard line. In fact, it's too late. The issue is that, as Mr. Krishnan has said, that Air India had its ups and downs, but this is the first time where a budgetary support has been given to Air India in the last couple of years. Earlier, Air India has managed to get out of and survive on its own. Now the issue is merger. Merger definitely is extremely bad for Air India, and the Kopu report quoted is absolutely correct. Kopu, in fact, had suggested that we should demerge it and keep the holding company. That has not been implemented by government. The government is adamant that they will run this airline, and they will run it as a merged airline, and they will not even privatize it or divest in it, which was being done in 2001. It failed, but it was practically through. So this is a policy decision which government has taken. The Prime Minister has also made a statement from the Red Fort Independence Day address in August 2009 that they will not allow Air India to go down.
Right.
So if this is the policy of the government, we'd like to know how long do they want to carry on a life support system with the budgetary coffers open. Any amount can be given to Air India.
Right, sir. Before I come to R.Krishnan, sir, let me ask you one quick question
money.
again, Mr. Sanat Kaul. Let me follow up with one other quick question, sir. Do you agree with the Aviation Minister Ajit Singh when he says the strike should be over immediately, with immediate effect? Do you see the pilots doing that at all? And don't you think the pilots are actually holding passengers and passengers who use the airlines to ransom?
Of course they are. There is no doubt about it. So it all depends on how the government manages the strike and how the pilots are, give in or don't give in. We have to watch.
Right. R.Krishnan, let me ask you
this. There's nothing else to say.
Right, sir.
There's no way by which you can justify this strike.
Mr. Kaul, we'll come back to you. Let me go to R.Krishnan quickly and ask you this. First of all, do you agree that strike should end, first of all? And do you also think that the government has always had a soft corner for AI and flash strikes are nothing new? They need to take a line, and they need to take a line right away.
You see, as far as the strike is concerned, it should be called off immediately. With the people who have paid for their fares, for the plan, for the travel, they should be penalized the way they are being. So the strike should be called off immediately. As far as the soft corner is concerned, it's very well known in the sense that when they decided to merge the airline, there was a year-and-a-half work before that. Committee of Secretaries, there was a presentation to Planning Commission, to the Prime Minister's office, then the GOM, then the Cabinet. And, I must say that, my esteemed friend from the left parties, Mr. Dipankar Mukherjee, their party did not oppose merger at that time. They did not. They only wanted there should be no loss of jobs. We must have one public sector airline, and even I agree with it. I may not agree with their ideology, but I certainly agree it could have been worked out. But for whatever reason it was not worked out, certainly the government is responsible. To say that they have got a soft corner, well, it's a question of interpretation. The government did not have the political will to take decisions as a result of which you are in this state of affairs.
Right. So, Mr. Krishnan, you brought up the merger. We'll talk about the merger in detail, but that's after a short breather. Yeah. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. We'll talk about all things Air India and Indian Airlines, the erstwhile Indian Airlines. After the short breather, stay tuned. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Picture. Let me quickly go across to Sanat Kaul. Sir, let me ask you this. Air India is not a stranger to crisis. Of course, this is not the first one that we've seen in Air India. But what is it, according to you, that led to this one particularly? Do you think it's merely unprofitable routes, as some people claim, or the burden of extra aircraft in their fleet? What do you think led us to this current crisis?
No, well, definitely the merger has to be a merger of both all the unions of Air India and Indian Airlines, and this was not done properly. Now, let me just go back a little bit and say, when the privatization of Air India was taking place in 2001, all the unions of Air India, that was only Air India that time, had got together and had supported the step to privatize it. So this time when the merger took place, there was no effort to get the unions on the side, and therefore the whole thing has become an issue of merger, of putting together the two categories of pilots or commercial people together. It's a personal issue which is coming up in the way, and it has become extremely difficult to manage it.
Right.
The merger, therefore, has not succeeded in spite of 4 years.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Mukherjee, let me ask you this. Like Mr. Krishnan just said, at the time when the merger was happening, the left parties didn't really oppose it at the time. Do you think the merger itself is, in a very large part, responsible for the mess that Air India finds itself in?
Again, I am saying, when I specifically, I am a little shocked that this right and left business is coming from someone from the media. While the report, when I talked about, it is right, left, center. Someone should go through that report. And there, they say it's a hasty merger. Left did not say do it in 6 months. Number two, that was the hasty merger is one of the major issues. The second issue is what the CAG calls a recipe for disaster. Now, no one is talking about that. What was the recipe for disaster? Just before that, the then civil ministers, instead of acquiring 28 aircrafts, he went on to 68 aircrafts. And they're saying that Air India was bleeding, Indian Airlines is bleeding, and the Indian Civil Aviation Minister, he's also from a private sector, he knows how to privatize and all that. And he took that decision of shifting from 28 to 68, 34,000, another 8,000 crores extra for airlines before the merger. So he has already made this whole thing paralyzed. And then comes the human factor, and that they want to take as a play for putting the airlines down. So it is not only this, the two reasons I said them, and third reason what you told. It is again not media reports and that reports. People say. It is not people say. It is here in the committee and even the CAG reports that profitable routes are given to the same point. Second point I want to counteract. Privatize I'm seeing. Should I hand over to Kingfisher, Sahara, or other airlines which have gone down like hell?
That's a very
This is, as a matter of fact, I am charging here that the then Civil Aviation Ministry, in concurrence with the Prime Minister, was basically working as a promoter for these private airlines to see that they are closed.
We've taken your point.
This is the second point which I want to say. Third point, as far as the pilot strike is concerned, I again say, so far as the human issues are concerned, the integration part, there's a human resource integration part is also. That was not done correctly. It is not right and left. It's absolutely a management decision how they do it.
Right.
In spite of that, this has happened. The first thing is to strike, close the strike, stop on the strike, but you also withdraw all your vindictive actions. After all, I cannot say that they are unpatriotic, someone is telling.
Right.
It's not clear.
We take your point,
no, the pilots who had worked for 5 months without salary, all of a sudden they become unpatriotic, they will be so unreasonable and that thing.
Point
and
taken, sir. I have to get Mr. Krishnan in right now. Mr. Krishnan, your views, first of all. We'll get to what Mr. Mukherjee said in a bit. But first of all, do you agree with Mr. Sanat Kaul that the merger, even Ajit Singh has said in an interview to a television channel, saying that the merger, he didn't call it a mistake, but he did say it was completely unsuccessful. There's something went horribly wrong. Do you think the merger was responsible?
I'll tell you. No. So I'll tell you one thing. It's very easy to do all kinds of post-mortem, because you don't have to take responsibility. You just make a statement. Very difficult. The merger might have been a good idea. I'm still telling you, merger could have worked. You have a common engineering facility. You have a common, maintenance facility. You have got a hub and spoke where Air India flies international long-haul routes. Indian Airlines flies the domestic routes. You had everything which actually suggested and it could have worked. Now at the level of HR it did not happen. As they say, 70% has been done, merger has been done, legal merger has been done. There are problems at the level of pilots, at the level of engineers and at the level of cabin crew. Now as far as the Air India pilots are concerned, their contention is that the Indian Airlines part of the Air India pilots should not fly the 787. That is where the whole fight has started. If you remember, when both 16 pilots from each airline were supposed to go for training, it was the Air India guys who refused. Then they went to Bombay High Court, they got a decision in their favor. Then it went to Supreme Court, then it went to 1:1, they said. Now they have struck work. So it is completely idiotic for them to have behaved like that. If it's a question of salaries and promotion policies, these are matters you can sit down and talk. But to strike work on this issue, let them deny it. They were talking about this all along. So that is number one. And secondly, to answer another question on acquisition of aircrafts, let me tell you one thing. There was no acquisition by Air India and Indian Airlines for nearly 25 years. Now they're talking about 28 aircrafts. They're talking about A340, which Air India should have acquired. Do you know A340 production line has been closed by Airbus? It would have been disastrous had you bought those aircrafts. And secondly, out of that 50 wide-bodied aircrafts, how many have we got? We have got 12 of 300, 777-300, 8 of 200s, and they've got Boeing 737 for the Air India Express.
Right.
The big 3 more of 300s, 777-300 we have not acquired so far. 27 of Dreamliners have not come. You could have cancelled it if you wanted. As far as Indian Airlines is concerned, they bought in 43 Airbus. What happened to the entire acquisition of Indian Airlines part was 70% was replacement, 30 was addition. So if you're talking about a big country like India, this acquisition is nothing absolutely. And profitable routes, yes, there is certain amount of truth in what Mr. Dipankar said on certain routes from Kerala. But when it comes to other routes, India-US direct flight, nobody else was flying, only Air India was doing it.
So you mentioned, you mentioned the executive pay scale, and that's where the problem seems to be emanating from. Do you see any truth in the allegations by the pilots saying that the government and the people on board who are running the airlines right now used their discriminatory powers and in wage hikes and promotions? Do you see any truth in those allegations?
I want to know one thing. How can the Air India pilots or Indian Airlines pilots for that matter, they want executive positions also and they want to do the command flight also? You can't, it doesn't happen in private airlines. It doesn't happen internationally. No, you have got to bureaucratize the entire airline.
I cannot go ahead with this. I have two basic issues. Number one, it's not fair. I don't want that the media will decide now, or media channels, some people will come and decide whether this report was absolutely wrong, it is a rubbish, whether the CAG report was rubbish, and we will like to try to find a new decision. This is not correct. I don't think, I want the parliament to reply to this. Absolutely. I want the parliament to report.
You have a point,
this report has not been made without on a hearsay.
You have a point, sir. Your colleague on the
recommendations of the parliament.
So your colleague on the...
So you mean to say we have no freedom to say anything on this?
I need to...
CAG report on acquisition.
I need to go to Mr. Saif-ud-Din Soz. Professor Saif-ud-Din Soz has joined us.
Business media will run this country.
Professor Saif-ud-Din Soz has joined us. We must get him into the conversation before we go any further. Welcome to the show, Mr. Soz.
Sir, it's not fair. Whosoever it is.
Sir, please, we have to go to Mr. Soz now. We have to go to Mr. Soz now. Gentlemen, please, I have to go to Mr. Soz now. Mr. Soz, welcome to the show. Like you've been hearing hot, heated scenes in the studio here right now. But let me ask you this. You're the member of the Standing Committee on Aviation in Parliament. Do you think that Air India has been mismanaged over years and it's the fault of the people running it? And also, do you think that the merger was a mistake?
You see, I think merger was a mistake because we didn't witness good relation between the two sides, Air India and Indian Airlines. The managers will be knowing better. But as for the ministry's functioning, you see, Kaul's book has mentioned so many things. I will not go into the question of interference by private parties. I will not go to that side. But he has said is a shameful, you see, corruption and mismanagement within the ministry. And he was an insider, see, until very recent times, he was the secretary in the ministry. And it is an eyewitness account. And we know things are not improving and it's a worry for us. We wish Air India well because it's a national asset. But the whole parliament, both houses are worried about Air India.
Right.
The government is worried. And the hope generated by Honorable Prime Minister, UPA chairperson, is great. But that reflects the trust of Honorable Prime Minister.
Right.
That doesn't reflect that merely because of that Air India will survive or it
right,
has
sir.
any
Fair
future.
point. Fair. Let me stop
and
you there, sir.
The new minister has started very well. He has said, pull the socks and get down to reality. We wish him well.
Right, right.
It is a dangerous situation.
Right, sir.
Internal reforms are not taking place and ministry is not transparent. So many things have gone wrong And then CMD made the minister at one point of time make wrong statement in the Rajya Sabha because they were trying to hide facts. If they hide facts in this time of Right to Information Act being enforced and so many laws, then how can you improve Air India? I
Right,
do
sir.
not
Point
know.
taken, sir. Let me go to Sanat Kaul very quickly, sir. We have to go take another break. But before we take the break, Mr. Sanat Kaul, let me ask you this. The agitation has now seen daily earnings from international passengers dip to about 9 crore for Air India. Lenders who are part of the bailout package are now concerned because the bailout, of course, was performance-linked. There was a performance-based criteria. What do you see happening on that front? Lenders are freaking out.
Absolutely. Lenders have to watch, and lenders' interests have to be taken care of. So if the government coffers are open, they'll have to subsidize it more. Because with this kind of industrial action taking place, pilots going on strike, the whole airline is coming to a halt, and the lenders will definitely be very, very upset. In this case, of course, the lender, the government is there as a major lender, and therefore the government itself has to take the knock.
Right. Right,
but,
sir.
In any other case, I mean, I'll give you an example of Japan Airlines, which was into as deep a trouble as Air India. It was given a package, it's turned around in 3 or 4 years, it's started making profits again. So it's a matter of how determined is the government to turn it around.
Right, right, sir. We'll take another short break right then, sir. We'll come back and discuss what some people are saying is the only way to save the Maharaja. But that's after the break. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching The Big Picture. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Picture. Mr. Mukherjee, let me ask you this. Do you think the erstwhile mighty Maharaja, as we used to call Air India, do you think its days are numbered, going by the way it's been mismanaged, going by the way strikes every other day? Where do you think Air India is going?
No, I don't have an pessimistic views like this. It has to say, if what Mr. Soos says, that gives encouragement. It's an asset. You treat it as an asset. And I don't know whether Mr. Soos, I was asking whether he is still a minister. If he is not a minister, I'm sure if Mr. Soos would have been at the helm of the affairs, he would have handled it much better than the way it has been handled for the last 6 years. It is a management question. Industrial relations is a management question. Now, this management question you cannot pass on to someone. And if you say these fellows are only irresponsible and all, then those who have been responsible for such a big mess in Air India, whether there has been any indictment after this, whether anyone has been indicted after the CAG report, whether any action, let the action start from the top. Why you want in between? That is not required. Again, I said the pilots of both the airlines should discuss with each other and try to find a solution, not leave it to the business dailies or the media or the the government or the judiciary to this. They must sort it out, these issues, but they should go back to the work, provided the action which has been taken, that should be withdrawn so that there can be an amicable atmosphere for discussion.
That's what you're saying. Pilots need to come down from their high horse, and the government.
High horse means government should also have this, no vindictive
Find
action.
a middle path is what
Find
you're
a start of an action so that this strike, their customers are not getting affected.
Right.
And I wish Mr. Soos is there to give his good sermon, these things, sage advice to the ministry.
Absolutely. We'll come to Mr. Soos in just a minute, but before that, let me go to R.Krishnan. Sir, is finding the middle path going to be enough to save?
See, I'll tell you one thing. It is like an egg. You have scrambled that egg. It's very difficult to unscramble it again. I think the only way is go ahead with the merger and try and remove the knots and make it a big airline again. It will happen. After all the private airlines were built on the expertise and people who came from Air India and Indian Airlines. So you can really do it now. If you go back and say we're going to demerge, I'm telling you, you're going to have serious problems. You will have lots of issues which were hidden earlier, will come back, and you will never be able to hold even 2 airlines. So it is not a question of divided we stand, united we stand, divided we fall. Now, if divided they stand, united they will again fall. So I personally feel you must go ahead with it.
Right.
And my point about these 2 reports, as a media person, I have a right to take a critical view. Whether I agree or don't agree, it hardly makes any difference to the parliament.
Fair point, fair point, sir.
And I stick to that.
I completely agree with that. You have the right to make your own opinion heard. Let me go to Mr. Soos. Professor Soos, Professor Saif-ud-Din Soos, tell us, you obviously have seen it very closely. You're a member of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Aviation. Where do you see Air India going from here? Even if the strike does get over anytime soon, even if Civil Aviation Minister Ajit Singh manages to strike a deal with the striking pilots, don't you think the problems in Air India are far too systemic to save it?
You see, Mr. Ajit Singh has a unique advantage this time. He's a new man to this ministry. He enjoys goodwill in both houses of parliament because we have to give him time. He has responded well and said, pull up the socks and improve your functioning, and he has given a message. But he can take a great advantage from the will of Government of India. That has been expressed by the Honorable Prime Minister. But much depends on what the minister himself does and his management does. I don't have much hope. Some people tell me that this present CMD is a right person. I said, I cannot pin hope with an individual. I wish him well. I have heard very good things about him. But I know the CMD at one point of time, he made the minister make a wrong statement. They cancelled flight from Delhi to Dubai half an hour before departure. And the pilot came to my residence later because the Kashmiris, some couldn't go because they had a patient there and they were crying. And it was simply because the air hostesses didn't turn up for the work. And when I raised this question in the parliament, the then CMD made the minister make a wrong statement. No flight was cancelled. And that pilot, a Sikh gentleman, is an honest man. I know him very closely. And he must be called by this minister, say what happened on that day. And it was full to capacity, and he told them, this is shameful because you are wasting the resources, and this is a great, huge loss.
Sir.
So unless this ministry, there are two things. One is that political will. It must be expressed now by Mr. Ajit Singh, and because he enjoys trust of both houses of parliament and the nation. And the second thing is that this ministry has to become transparent by the day. It is not transparent at the moment.
Sir. We take your point, sir.
Mr. Ajit Singh should take the cue.
We take your point. Ajit Singh is a new man. We should give him some time. Last word on the show to Sanat Kaul. Sir, briefly, if you could, I'm going to ask you a controversial question. Some people, at least in the business community and the business journalist community, seem to think that the time has now come to hand over the Maharaja, Air India, to private management. Is that the only way of saving the Maharaja? Briefly, if you could, sir. Mr. Kaul.
I think so. I think the government system of functioning is now becoming counterproductive, and we've tried enough. And if management is given to a private airline or to some private management who can turn it around for some time and then return the thing or sell it or whatever they want to do, whatever government decides to do. But at present, I think there is an extremely urgent case for a total management takeover, like it was done in the case of Satyam. I think it's very important that this is done so that a new system, a full group of people work on it and try and sort out all the issues. It is not
Mr. Kaul.
likely to be successful within the system.
Right, Mr. Kaul, we have to end the program there. We're completely out of time. Of course, two really important points that I think came out of the discussion today was one, Mr. Kaul saying that perhaps a possible takeover like Satyam should be thought about or exercised in case of Air India. Also, what Mr. So said, that Mr. Ajit Singh is a new civil aviation minister. We should give him some time. He's talking to the pilots. He's doing his best. Perhaps we should give them some more time to sort their difficulties out. That's all the time we have tonight from The Big Picture. Till next time, when we get you another edition of The Big Picture with another hot topic and a very eminent panel. Thank you, goodbye, and thanks for watching.
Don't hand over the